What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be starting command lists in our game. So basically popping up a menu that has all the inputs and the input name that we need to perform certain actions and certain commands. Now this is important because we're not quite done the input buffer, the advanced input buffer and advanced input command series yet. So it's important that we get started on this sooner rather than later because there's going to be a few things that we're going to have to kind of prepare for and think about while we're moving ahead. We have held input, double inputs, and charged inputs to go. And with all those things, we might have other symbols that we add and things like that. But more importantly, we need to start thinking about how we're going to handle certain things in the command buffer. So let's go ahead and show you what this looks like. If I pause, then all my attacks show up like this. Now, I can't scroll right now, and obviously it's not as neat as it could be. You would make it look neater, and we will make it look neater in the series. But this is the general gist of this. We have a button that has a background, right? And then we have the name of the command. And then we have the symbols or inputs that go into the command. So basically what buttons you have to press to make this command happen. And they're accurate. For example, of course all the basic attacks here are accurate, but also let's look at Fireball. If you guys are familiar with Fireball, if I do back forward light attack, then it does it. And you can see it in the input buffer on the left hand side there, or the input stack, it's actually performing, I perform the right moves to perform the Fireball. Now these are not hard coded, I grabbed them right from their actual commands and translated them to buttons. Just a quick side note. Command number 1 is not an error. That is the image I'm using for my light X attack. I will have to update that to make it look nicer, because it just looks terrible right here. But there's nothing wrong with it. It is the image I've given it. That's just how it happens to look. So, yeah, of course this needs more work, but I want to get this started because we have to start looking at certain things, like how we're going to handle our 4 button attacks that we have. These are our basic buttons that don't have anything else, but you can see they're in the command list. There you go. And that's what they look like, right? And I technically should be able to do this without doing this, but here you go. So I have all sorts of options we can choose here for my commands. Alright, so let's close that, and let's get into how we made this happen. So, if you have not followed the series, we're on episode 70. So you don't necessarily need to watch every episode to catch up if you don't want to, but I would highly recommend watching the input buffer episodes to catch up. So I'll leave a link in this iCard right here to the very first episode of that, because we are going to be using that logic today. Otherwise, if you would like to start from scratch and watch the entire series, like I said, we are 70 episodes in. I will leave the entire playlist right here for you. Okay. And so we don't have to do any code today. But I do want to show you the mutant character that we had. We changed over in the last episode, episode 69, to use the blueprint character now. So the commands in here don't matter anymore. In fact, you don't even need the mutant character class anymore in code. We're going to do this all in blueprint just because adding new characters this way makes it a little bit more challenging if you have a code class that goes along with it and you don't need it. If you need it, that's fine, but if you don't need it, there's so much logic that goes in the character classes in a fighting game that, you know, adding a new code class just to add a new blueprint class, just to add a new anim BP is just too much. So instead, we're going to use blueprint classes only for the children, just because it makes more sense. So with that said, in my mutant BP, which again, we covered making this last episode, there is one more thing we have to do in this episode to make our logic come true. And basically we need to fill out all of the data for all of our commands that we want our mutant to have. Now we can edit this at any time, and the command list will represent that. So this is good. If I could open them, there we go. I actually can put spaces here, because that was bothering me. Should have done that before. But yeah, you can see I have all my attacks here. I have my basic attacks, and I have my actual commands and combos. Alright, and I have my input types for all these. So this is basically the same way we were setting it up in code. Remember in the constructor, what I just showed you, how we had the name, and then we were setting has use command to false and all the inputs? This is the same thing. We're just doing it right here in the blueprint panel. So you can do it right in the class defaults section here. Alright, now something important. We have to add, if we want our basic attacks to show up, the attacks that I was just having booleans for, like light attack, medium attack, heavy, and special, then you're going to need to add a command that is the name of that, so like light attack, and just have one input, and it'll be the input we have to press. Now this actually works perfectly fine. Doing this, we can actually replace the booleans entirely and not have any logic or any moves that work outside of the command input. You could go as far as to replace move, right, and jump as well, and you could actually put them as part of it. And we may do that down the line just to clean it up a bit, have everything in the command buffer. For now, I'm not going to do that, but I am going to show you how you can do it if you want to transfer them all. It's okay if you don't want to. You don't have to. These can be basically just arbitrary. All right, you have these values, and you just couldn't. You don't have to ever check for them. You can continue to use your booleans. So these can kind of be arbitrary just so that we can add them to the command list, but you can also use them if you'd like. I will show you using them at the end. For now, let's get into making the actual command list. Okay, so for the command list, it's going to be basically 2 widgets. So go to where you want to create it and put it in menus, add new, blueprints, user interface, widget, blueprint. And now once you have your widget blueprint up here, then create 2 of them, call one command list element, or whatever you know that will help you remember what these are. Command list is the actual thing that pops up and holds all the individual commands. Command list element is one specific command and how you want that to look. Okay, so command list is pretty simple. When you open up the widget for the first time, it'll have a canvas panel. All we're going to add is a vertical box. That way we can add the commands vertically. You can add them on top of each other basically, so every new entry is below the previous entry. So pretty simple stuff here. To do it, you can literally just type vertical box and drag this directly onto the canvas panel or onto the viewport here. And then call it whatever you want. I call it command elements vertical box. And make sure it is a variable because we are going to add to it. I don't have anything else as of now, including scrolling behavior, so you may want to add that if you know how. Otherwise, we will cover it in the next episode of this we do. There will probably be 3 command list episodes. Alright, now let's go over the design view of the command list element next. So basically, you can put anything here that you want. What I think of when I think of command list and individual commands are the name of the command, the inputs required to perform the command. But feel free to put more than that if you'd like. So what I did was I added an image that I wanted for the background. So this is just an image I made. It's not one I found anywhere. I just made it. And this is my background for my command. Then I put in text. So literally image and then text, and the text is the command name. So for the command name, make sure it is a variable. We are going to need to access that data or set that data when we're parsing through the commands that the character has. I also gave it a Z order of 2, just because I want to make sure the command name was appearing above the image and all. And I just gave it some certain positions that we can anchor and things like that, just so that this can stay where I want it to stay. If the screen size is different, if your resolution is different, that way we know, that way everything is looking the way we intend. That's all. Alright, and then the last thing we need to do is add a horizontal box. We've not used one of these yet, but it's very similar to how a vertical box works. So here's the horizontal box, just bring it into the canvas panel or bring it onto the screen. I did the same thing where I lined it up with the image itself, and I also set some very specific values that can be anchored into place. I have an episode on anchoring if you want to learn more about that. Link it in this iCard right here in the top right corner. Okay, and the horizontal box is basically going to hold all of our images. So the images of the inputs we need to input to perform this command. So like if it's light punch, then it'll display the light punch image. Okay. And again, make sure these are variables. So we need the horizontal box to be a variable and the text to be a variable. Of course, the image can be a variable. I made it a variable, but I don't believe we need to change anything with it. Just so you can see my settings, I've put in an image and I've changed it to draw as box. But you can do all this however you want. It will depend on the images you have and things like that. Alright, now let's actually go through our command list logic. Here is this, and here is this. Okay. So, the command list element is very simple. All we really have to do is set the inputs and set the name. However, we can't really set the inputs until we can't really set the name until we're parsing through. And we definitely can't set the inputs until we're parsing through. So, instead what I've opted to do is just have a helper function here where we can set the name when we're going through and just pass in the name to this function, call this function on this element, and then we'll add the elements to the horizontal box for the images. So in terms of command list element, all you have to do is add a function, plus function, and I call it set command name, and I have an input parameter of type text. So you can add a parameter here, make it text, I called it name. Now, command name is my text, and I've made it a variable, remember? So you can drag it onto the screen, hit get command name, set text, and then pass in the name. Alright, I've already done this right above here, so deleted that stuff I just made, but there you go. This is all you need in command list element. The bulk of the work happens in command list. So let's go into command list. Now we only have what's here for event construct. We don't have anything else anywhere, no other functions, no other events. Basically, all this is going to be done on construction of this widget, and we'll be good to go. So, we do have our command elements vertical box, remember? I made that a variable. This is what's going to hold all of our command list elements. Here's my info for my sizing and all. If you want to copy that, you don't have to. Alright, then once we get into our event construct, what we have to do is essentially grab the character that we are, grab the character commands, and then display them to the widget. So first of all, in event construct, I cast to base character BP with the owning player pawn. Now, this widget I have right now coming up when we go to pause the game, so just to show you how it's working on my end, you don't have to copy this. I have a base character BP, which we went over last episode, and I have an input action for when I pause, open pause menu, and right now I'm creating the command list widget and adding it to the viewport. Now really here I should be setting the owning player to be like self, but it doesn't really matter in this case. When you do create a widget from a character BP like this, it will kind of input self on its own or use the character controller that spawned it. To be safe, we really should do this, so I'll go ahead and do it. I think it actually wants the player controller. There you go. So you can do that. I mean, we'll force the player controller later. It doesn't really matter. My point is, this will work regardless. For now, we'll go over making it, a little bit better later. But feel free to do that if you want. You can see I can pop it up at any time and it works. Alright, so add that or don't, doesn't really matter, but just want to show you that's kind of the proper way to do it. However, since we're doing it from the character and we're player controller 0, it will work regardless if we pass one in or not. So get owning player pawn is going to return the mutant that we are, or the character that we are, in this case the mutant. We're going to cast it to a base character just to make sure that it's any of the character types that we know has a command list. If you have other characters that aren't intended to be used for actually playing, or are maybe AI that act a little bit differently, then you might not want this to work this way. So if we cast to a base character BP, we're making sure that it's someone that'll have a command list. So then we go ahead and drag off of that and search for our character commands array. And this is a structure we made early on in the input buffer series, and this holds all of our commands. So it's the inputs, the name, and if we've used the command or not. Okay, and we're going to loop through them. So just drag off of that, type for each loop. And what we're going to do is for each command, we're going to do all this logic. For each command, we're going to create a command list element widget, which is this guy right here. Okay, for every command, we want one of these. That makes sense. And then we're going to set some data in for both the name and the inputs that we need to make this command or this widget look like the command. So the image is going to represent what the command needs to be performed. Okay, so first things first, we're going to create the all the widgets and the icons, and then we're going to go through and put the name. Go ahead and drag off of the let me show you how this works. This create command list element is create widget, and then I put in command list element, just so no one gets confused on that. And now once you have this, it returns the widget that was created, so you can drag off of it and grab whatever you need. For now, we need to grab the required inputs horizontal box. This is the horizontal box that will have the required inputs, all the images that we want. Okay. So drag off and get your horizontal box right here. Then you can leave it for now because we're gonna get into this in a second. But we're gonna need this, so keep this here. And then here's where we're gonna be setting up each individual icon. So we already have another widget here. We have an input stack icon widget. Now we made this back when we were making the input stack on the HUD, but I'm going to use the same image here, and feel free to. If you want to make your own image for this for whatever reason, then feel free to do that as well. But I feel like the image is perfectly fine to use on the input stack as well as the command list. So we do create widget yet again, but this time we put in our input stack icon. Okay. So we're going to, the way this works now, let's think about this for a second. We have our command list element widget, and we have our required inputs horizontal box. But we need to know how many inputs are going to be created for each command. That way we know how many images to display. So how many input stack icon widgets to display. The way we get that information, we drag off of our character commands, grab the array element, and grab the input types. Okay, so drag off your array element, break it. This has all the data of this command. Input types is basically the inputs required to perform it, like forward, forward, back, or quarter, circle, punch, whatever. So input types will have all the inputs we need. You can drag off of that into a for each loop. And then for every one of those, we can go ahead and create a stack icon widget. And from that input stack icon, I'll have to open it up so that you can see, kind of remember what was going on in that widget, because it has been some time. Here we go. The input stack icon was the individual icon that has it just has an image with, right now it's the left arrow icon, but the image gets replaced with the actual input once we give it the enum value. So it's pretty simple here. We go back into our command list element, our command list, and we created this. We're grabbing the image, that's what the input icon is, and we're going to set the brush off of the input icon. Now set brush is a little bit of a strange term here, but basically this means you're setting the image of this object. Okay, so don't be confused. We're going to change the image of the input stack icon widget. And the image we're going to change it to is going to be a little bit weird, but this is basically how we did it in the input stack as well. We just have we have an array of all these images, and I don't have an image for this one that I wanted to use, so that's why that's blanked out, but all the other ones I filled out. So what I've done is I've made a new variable, and I've made it of type slate brush. Okay, so you can change your type by clicking on this. thing on the left-hand side of the variable, change it to slate brush. I called it icon images. And then if you go to the details panel, you can click on it to change the type from single variable to array. So I have an array of slate brushes, and then you'll have to compile. And once you compile, you'll be able to add elements to the array here in the default value. And then you can go ahead, open these up once you create them, and put in the images you want. So it doesn't really matter what order you put them in, just as long as the order you're putting them in is going to be equal to the input types array. All right. So to make that a little bit more clear, is I have in my code, in my fighter template character .h, we have e input type, okay? And the input type is going to be basically, we have these values that are assigned to inputs. So the way we did it in the advanced input buffer tutorial is like forward is right, backward is left, and then we have jump, and I have diagonal jumps and like diagonal crouching, block, throw, my actual attacks, all this stuff. So what I've done is I've assigned the images in the same order as the E input type structure. You don't have to do this, but this will make your life so much easier because you don't have to then search for each individual element and then display the image. You can simply follow the E input type structure here. Okay, you can see forward, backward, jump, backward, jump, crouch, forward, crouch, backward, crouch. And if we read off this, there's none, and that's okay. Forward, backward, jump, backward, jump, crouch, forward, crouch, backward, crouch. And then it continues. So I've set up the images in that order. That way, instead of having to do a switch statement or compare anything, I can just grab the index at that location and set that up. So the way that's going to work is we have our input types and we were looping through them. Well, we can get an enum at its core is essentially either a byte or an integer or some sort of data that it stores, basically what value it is in this enum. And so we can convert an enum to an integer very easily. You may have to do this manually, or you can pass it into an integer minus integer, but it will tell you that it's not compatible. So if you do int, it will say to int byte. So remember, this enum value is like, it's a byte, and we can convert it to an integer. All right, that's what I'm doing right here, but that's how you can do it. You do to int. And now we have the actual integer value of this enum. Well, enums are easy, unless you go and change their values, because technically you can set a value of an enum, like I could set this to be 100, 200, 300 if I wanted. But by default, since I'm not doing that, 0, 1, 2, 3, and it just goes up like that. It's really simple. So, if this is index 1 here of this enum, if this enum value is 1, e forward is equal to 1, well then guess what? I subtract it. I subtract 1 from it since we have one more index in the code array. We have this none that doesn't have an image. So I always want to subtract 1 to make up for that offset. And then I get the image at that location. So if we look at this again, we have array element. So if this was forward, if forward was the input, remember, forward, e forward has an input of 1, or has a value of 1, excuse me. Well, at index 1 is backward, so that's not correct. But if we subtract the offset based off of the additional inputs we have in the code, so 1 minus 1 will be 0, and 0 is forward. So if we get icon images, or if we drag icon images, and we say get, and you can get a reference here or a copy, it doesn't matter in this case, but reference is fine. And then pass in the subtraction, so we basically pass in 0 here. Then this value that we'd be getting is icon images 0, and that's the forward arrow image. And that's what we're setting the brush to on this input stack icon. Okay, so now we have an input stack icon with the proper image for the input that the user has to input to, continue on that command. All right, now that's good, but we're not done yet. So we need to, add these to the horizontal box. So just setting this isn't going to do anything. We can't see it. We haven't added to a viewport. But our command list is added to the viewport. And so we're creating a command list element widget, remember, this guy, and we're filling out the horizontal box of this. All right, so we've set the brush of this, and now we have to add child to horizontal box. To get this, it's actually a target of the horizontal box, so you can do it a few different ways. You can just drag off of the horizontal box, I think is the easiest, or you can unclick context sensitive and then drag in your horizontal box. Okay, but you just drag off of this, do add child to horizontal box. And for the content we want to add, we're going to be adding the input stack icon widget in this case. So we set all this stuff for the widget, and now we want to add it to the horizontal box. Now this is on loop body, so this is going to loop through every input we have. So if it's back, forward, punch, you know, then it's going to go back, put in the back icon, forward, put in the forward icon, and then punch and put on the punch icon. And then once it does that, the loop will be completed, and we can then set up the rest of the logic that we need to do, which in this case is set the command name and then add the new element to the vertical box in the actual command list. So we haven't added anything visible. That way when the user opens it, if this is, you know, still changing while it's opening, they don't see that. It's a lot cleaner to only add it once everything is already has the proper data. So on completed of the second for each loop here, not the first one, but the second one when we just went through all the inputs, then we have to set the name of this command. Well, the name of the command is also stored in this break command node here. We have the name. So the set command name is the function we made in command list element right here. What we're going to do is we are going to drag off of the command list element widget and call set command name right here. Then pass in the name. I'm going to pass in the name from the command. It will automatically say convert string to text for you, or you can do to text string and then pass this in, either way, but you can just drag these in and it will convert it for you. Once you do that, then you should have the name set up properly on the command list element. Last thing we need to do is add the element to the vertical box in the command list. So this vertical box right here. Okay, so drag your command elements VB, add child to vertical box, and then we're going to pass in the command list element widget. Okay, and that's what we're doing right here. And once you've done that, we've set up all the inputs on the command list element, we've set the name on the command list element, and then we've added the command list element to the command list. And we've done that for every command. And by doing that, you've gone ahead and created your command list widget. Okay? There you go. There it is right there. Now you can always change it, make it look nicer, but you can also, it will represent any changes that you make to the commands. So for example, command number 1, if we go to mutant BP, I have command number 1 has backward crouch exceptional attack. Well, if I make backward crouch, let's say heavy attack, okay? Let's say I change it to that. Now when I go into the game, I can do this, and look, it's backward crouch heavy attack now. It's that simple. It will now represent everything you have. So the command list is essentially complete. The reason for the other episodes we're going to be doing one for each character and potentially having them on the screen at the same time. I've seen that, and you know, sometimes that's nice so that both players can look at the same time. And otherwise, we're going to have basically adding the other symbols that we may have. So if we have like quarter circle input and we want to put that on the actual command list as opposed to quarter circle, we can. We don't have to. Or we can put, you know, any other special icons we have, and just cleaning it up and being able to actually go through it with the controller. Or with the keys even, since we can't scroll or anything right now. But as far as the actual input, or the command list, it is actually made and working. We just need to be able to access it a little bit better. So there you go, guys. That's how you can make your command list in your fighting game, or really any game, and make it dynamic, so as much as you change it, it will change with you. So this is pretty sweet. I'm very excited about this. I'm very excited about using this more in the future. So if this helped you make your command list and did what you wanted, then please subscribe. It does more for me and the channel than anything else you could do, and it's free. I've been doing a lot of UE5 content lately, so if you want to check that out, I'll leave some iCards here. You can see that. And we're going to be doing Unreal Engine 5, basically introductory live streams where I learn about it and we kind of go through it and explore it together. This Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as well as we did one last Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you are watching this after those have come out, then I'll leave an iCard right here for you to check those out. Lastly, guys, I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership and Patreon supporters and subscribers. Thank you guys so much for continuing to support all the series and this channel. I really appreciate it, and it really does let me continue making these videos with a lot more ease. So thank you guys so much, and I'll let you go. So I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.